A millionaire watches as his paraplegic son is fed by a single mother, with the care of someone who could be his own. When she starts caring for him with the love of a true mother, he is forced to confront his own pain. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Stay with us. The city skyline glittered in the evening light, a testament to human ambition and the power of wealth. From the penthouse office, on the 78th floor of the Mason Tower, Ethan Mason watched the city below with detached interest. His empire stretched across the horizon, buildings bearing his name dotting the landscape like chess pieces he had strategically placed over 2 decades of ruthless business acumen. "Mr. Mason, the board is waiting," his assistant's voice came through the intercom, pulling him back to reality. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes," Ethan replied, straightening his custom Italian suit. At 45, he still maintained the sharp physique and commanding presence that had intimidated countless business rivals. His dark hair was now threaded with distinguished silver at the temples, and the lines around his eyes spoke of years of hard decisions and calculated risks. The board meeting went as expected. Another quarter of record profits, another set of projections that exceeded Wall Street's expectations. Mason Enterprises had become a financial juggernaut under Ethan's leadership, diversifying from real estate into technology, healthcare, and renewable energy. The financial press had dubbed him the architect of modern wealth, a title he neither embraced nor rejected. "Excellent presentation, Mr. Mason," said Catherine Renee, the newest board member and CEO of a tech company Mason had recently acquired. "Your strategy for the Asian market expansion is impressively aggressive." Ethan nodded, acknowledging the compliment without emotion. "The opportunity won't last forever. We move now or lose ground to competitors." After the meeting, as executives filed out with their tablets and notebooks filled with action items, Walter Ferguson, Ethan's longtime CFO, and one of the few people who remembered the company's humble beginnings, lingered behind. "Another victory lap," Walter said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "You know, some people actually celebrate their successes." Ethan gathered his papers, not meeting Walter's gaze. "There's nothing to celebrate until we close the Singapore deal." Walter sighed. "You said the same thing about the Dubai project and the London acquisition before that. When was the last time you took a day off, went to dinner with friends, had a life outside these walls of glass and steel?" "I don't need a life coach, Walter," Ethan replied, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. "I need my CFO to make sure the numbers for Singapore are bulletproof." Later that evening, Ethan's driver took him through the busy streets of Manhattan to his Tribeca penthouse. The luxury apartment spanned 10,000 square feet of minimalist modern design, all clean lines, rare materials, and spectacular views. It had been featured in architectural magazines as a masterpiece of urban living, yet Ethan barely noticed his surroundings anymore. The space felt hollow, a showroom rather than a home. He poured himself 2 fingers of 30-year-old scotch and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, tiny figures hurried through their lives, couples holding hands, friends laughing together, families heading to dinner. Their ordinary moments of connection seemed as foreign to him as poverty. His phone rang, breaking the silence. The caller ID showed Dr. Harrison. Ethan's jaw tightened as he answered. "Mr. Mason, I'm calling about your monthly visit to the Connecticut facility," Dr. Harrison said, his voice carefully professional. "There's been some development regarding Lucas's condition that I think warrants your immediate attention." Ethan's hand tightened around the glass. "What kind of development?" "I'd prefer to discuss it in person. It's not an emergency, but I believe your presence would be beneficial. Tomorrow, if possible." After a long pause, Ethan replied, "I'll be there by noon," and ended the call. He drained his scotch in one burning swallow and refilled the glass. Lucas, his son. The thought alone was enough to awaken the gnawing pain he worked so hard to suppress. The accident had happened 5 years ago, when Lucas was just 13, a bright, athletic boy with Ethan's determination and his mother's creativity. Now, 18 and confined to a wheelchair, a constant reminder of Ethan's greatest failure. Ethan rarely visited the private medical facility in Connecticut where Lucas lived. Each visit was a carefully orchestrated affair, brief, clinical, focused, on medical updates rather than emotional connection. He provided the best care money could buy, top specialists, cutting-edge treatments, personal nurses, and therapists. Everything except what Lucas truly needed, a father willing to face the consequences of his actions. The next morning, Ethan cancelled all meetings and had his driver take him to Connecticut. The facility was disguised as a private estate, set on 20 acres of manicured grounds with security that rivaled small embassies. Nothing but the best for the son of Ethan Mason, even if that son hadn't seen his father for more than 30. Minutes at a time in years. Dr. Harrison met him at the entrance, his expression betraying concern despite his professional demeanor. "Thank you for coming so promptly, Mr. Mason. What's the situation?" Ethan asked, walking briskly through the marble-floored lobby. Physically, Lucas is stable. The new treatment protocol is showing promising results for his nerve regeneration, Dr. Harrison explained as they moved toward his office. However, we're seeing concerning patterns in his psychological evaluations. Increased depression, withdrawal from activities he previously enjoyed, refusal to participate in some therapy sessions. Ethan stopped walking. "I'm paying for the best psychological care in the country. What are they doing about it?" Dr. Harrison's expression remained diplomatically neutral. "With all due respect, Mr. Mason, Lucas is now 18. He's an adult, not just medically but legally, and he's made it clear that what he wants most is—" "Is what?" Ethan interrupted. "More time with you, real time, not just status updates. And medical consultations." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not possible right now. My schedule—" "Mr. Mason," Dr. Harrison interrupted, something he rarely dared to do, "Lucas has requested to leave the facility. As an adult, it's his right. He wants to move to your New York residence." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. "That's out of the question. He needs specialized care, daily therapy, medical supervision, all of which can be provided in a home setting. We've already assessed the feasibility." Dr. Harrison handed Ethan a thick folder. "This is the proposed care plan. Care. It would require modifications to your penthouse and hiring specialized staff, but it's entirely possible." Ethan stared at the folder without opening it. The thought of having Lucas in his home, of facing his son every day, seeing the wheelchair, the reminders of what happened, the carefully constructed walls he'd built around his guilt began to crack. "There's something else," Dr. Harrison added quietly. "Lucas has been researching experimental treatments on his own. There's a new neural interface therapy showing promising results in patients with similar injuries. He's determined to pursue it, with or without your approval." Ethan looked up, sharply. "Why wasn't I informed about this treatment before?" "Because it's still in clinical trials, and the success rate, while promising, doesn't meet the threshold you established for treatments you wanted Lucas to consider." Dr. Harrison paused. "But Lucas is an adult now, Mr. Mason. These decisions are becoming his to make." The reality of the situation began to sink in. For years, Ethan had maintained control through distance, managing his son's care from afar, making decisions through intermediaries, keeping the painful reality at arm's length. That control was slipping away. "I'd like to see him," Ethan said finally. Dr. Harrison nodded. "He's in the East Garden. It's a good day for him physically. He's been using the exoskeleton support for short periods." Ethan walked through the facility alone, nodding curtly to staff who recognized him instantly, despite his infrequent visits. The East Garden was a therapeutic space designed for both physical and emotional healing. Gentle paths accessible to wheelchairs, sensory plants, a small waterfall that created negative ions believed to improve mood. And there was Lucas, sitting near the koi pond, sunlight playing across his features. Even from a distance, Ethan could see how much his son had changed. No longer the boy from his fragmented memories, but a young man with a jaw that echoed Ethan's own determination, eyes that held both wisdom and pain beyond his years. For a moment, Ethan stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sight of what he had lost, what he had caused, what he had run from. Then Lucas turned his head and their eyes met across the garden. No smile of welcome, no hatred either, just a steady gaze that held Ethan accountable in ways that all his wealth and power couldn't deflect. It was time to face what he had been, avoiding for 5 long years. The question was whether Ethan Mason, master of the financial universe, had the courage to rebuild the most important thing he had ever broken. "I want to come home," Lucas said, his voice stronger than Ethan remembered. "Not to some new medical wing you'll build. To keep me contained. Home." They sat facing each other in the garden, the burbling of the fountain filling the silence between sentences. Lucas's wheelchair was a sleek, custom carbon fiber design that somehow made him look more athletic than confined. "Your treatment protocol is complex," Ethan replied, falling back on practicalities. "The facility here—" "Stop," Lucas raised his hand. "If you're going to hide behind medical jargon, just go back to New York. I've spent 5 years with doctors talking about my protocol while you fund everything from a safe distance." The accusation stung because it was true. Ethan shifted uncomfortably on the stone bench, unaccustomed to being confronted so directly. In boardrooms, people stepped carefully around his temper. His son had no such compunction. "What do you want?" "From me, Lucas?" Ethan asked finally. "I want you to look at me without seeing your guilt," Lucas answered, his eyes so like his mother's, holding Ethan's gaze unflinchingly. "I want you to stop running from what happened. And yes, I want to live somewhere. That doesn't feel like a luxury prison, even if it comes with 24-hour medical supervision." 2 weeks later, against the advice of his executive team who warned about the impact on his schedule and productivity, Ethan found himself overseeing renovations to his Tribeca penthouse. The East Wing was being transformed into an accessible, living space with a therapy room, adaptive technologies and medical equipment disguised within high-end design. "The ceiling reinforcements for the transfer track system are complete," reported Sarah Reeves, the project manager Ethan had hired to oversee the renovations. She was in her mid-30s, with practical clothes and a no-nonsense attitude that had impressed Ethan from their first meeting. "The contractor wants to review the wet room specifications again. He's concerned about the gradient for wheelchair access." Ethan nodded, scanning the blueprints spread across his dining table. The renovations had consumed his attention for days, a welcome distraction from the emotions that threatened whenever he thought about Lucas actually living here. "Whatever Lucas needs," he replied. "If the contractor has concerns, bring in another, one who can meet the specifications." Sarah studied him for a moment. "With respect, Mr. Mason, changing contractors mid-project would set us back weeks. What Lucas needs is for this to be done right, not redone repeatedly." Her directness surprised him. Few people in his orbit spoke to him that way anymore. "You seem to have strong opinions about what my son needs," Ethan remarked, a slight edge to his voice. Sarah didn't flinch. "I worked as a pediatric physical therapist before moving into project management. I've seen what helps young people with spinal cord injuries thrive, and it's not perfection. It's progress, it's consistency and patience." Something in her words penetrated Ethan's usual defenses. "And what qualifies you to manage a multi-million-dollar renovation?" "I specialize in healthcare facilities," she replied evenly. "Before that, I oversaw the conversion of my family's hotel in Massachusetts after my daughter needed wheelchair access. I understand both the technical requirements and the human element." Ethan hadn't known she had a daughter. He'd hired her, based on her portfolio and recommendations alone. "Your daughter has a disability?" Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Had. Emma had leukemia. She needed the wheelchair during treatment." She paused. "She's been in remission for 3 years now." The simple revelation shifted something in Ethan's perception. This woman standing in his penthouse, efficiently managing his contractors, and confidently challenging his decisions, had faced her own battles, had faced them directly, not from behind the shield of wealth and assistants and specialists. "I'd like to meet with the contractor," Ethan said finally. "Walk me through his concerns." In the days that followed, Ethan found himself increasingly dependent on Sarah's expertise. She moved through the project with a practical compassion that considered both Lucas's medical needs and his dignity. When the specialized bed arrived, she insisted it look as normal as possible despite its medical functions. When they discussed the therapy room layout, she advocated for windows with a view of the city. "He'll be spending hours in that room," she explained. "It should feel like part of a home, not a medical facility." Ethan found himself sharing dinner with Sarah one evening after a long day of contractor meetings. They sat surrounded by construction materials in his half-finished kitchen, eating takeout from containers. "Tell me about Emma," he said suddenly, surprising himself with the personal question. Sarah looked up from her pad thai, her expression cautious. "What would you like to know?" "What was it like?" Ethan asked, unable to articulate the real question burning inside him. "When she was ill. How did you handle it?" Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes. "Terribly at first," she admitted with unexpected candor. "I tried to control everything. The treatments, the doctors, the schedules. I thought if I just worked hard enough I could somehow fix it all." She set down her fork. "It took me months to realize that what Emma needed most wasn't my management skills. It was my presence." The simple truth landed like a physical blow. Ethan had done the opposite, throwing money and managers at Lucas's care while withdrawing his presence entirely. "The renovations will be complete in 10 days, Ethan said, changing the subject abruptly. "Dr. Harrison is coordinating the staffing requirements. Lucas will need 24-hour nursing at first and daily therapy sessions." Sarah nodded, allowing him the retreat. "The staff quarters are nearly finished. The security system modifications will be done by Monday." She hesitated. "Have you considered what your own role will be, once Lucas is here?" "I'll ensure he has everything he needs," Ethan replied automatically. "That's not what I asked," Sarah said quietly. Before Ethan could respond, his phone rang. The display showed Walter Ferguson's name. He excused himself and answered. "We have a problem," Walter said without preamble. "James Harrington is making moves against our Singapore position." James Harrington. The name alone was enough to darken Ethan's mood. Once his business partner, now his most determined rival. The man hadn't forgotten being forced out of Mason Enterprises during its early days and had spent years building a rival company while waiting for opportunities to strike back. "What exactly is he doing?" Ethan asked, moving away from Sarah. "He's approached the Singaporean development minister with a competing proposal. Our sources say he's offering better terms than we are," Walter replied. "And that's not all. He's been meeting with Catherine Renee." "Our Catherine Renee? From the board?" Ethan's voice hardened. "The same. We don't know what they've discussed, but it can't be good. Harrington never makes social calls." After ending the call, Ethan returned to find Sarah gathering the takeout containers. "Business emergency?" she asked, not really expecting an answer. "Nothing I can't handle," Ethan replied automatically, but his mind was already racing. Harrington had been watching, waiting for Ethan to show weakness. Had he somehow learned about Lucas coming home? Was he using Ethan's divided attention as an opportunity to strike? "Mr. Mason," Sarah said, interrupting his thoughts. "May I speak freely?" "You've hardly held back so far," Ethan remarked dryly. "Lucas arrives in 9 days. I don't know what business crisis you're facing, but I do know that your son deserves more than a distracted father who's physically present but mentally elsewhere." She met his gaze directly. "He's had enough of that already." Instead of the anger he might have felt at such a presumptuous statement from an employee, Ethan felt something else: respect and an unsettling recognition of truth. "I need to review the Singapore proposal tonight," he said, already moving toward his home office. "We'll continue the contractor discussions tomorrow." Sarah nodded, gathering her things to leave. "One more thing," she said, pausing at the door. "Lucas called while you were on the phone. He wanted to know if he could bring his chess set from Connecticut. Apparently it has sentimental value." The chess set. A simple wooden one Ethan had given Lucas on his 10th birthday, teaching him to play during a rare weekend when business hadn't intruded. one of the few genuine connections they'd shared before the accident. "Of course he can," Ethan replied, his voice uncharacteristically soft. After Sarah left, Ethan tried to focus on the Singapore documents, but his mind kept returning to the chess set. To Lucas's request to bring a memento of their relationship, first proof that his son still held on to some memory of connection, despite years of Ethan's emotional absence. And beneath that thought lurked another: the unexpected way Sarah Reeves had begun to breach his carefully constructed walls. Her practical compassion, her directness, the way she saw through his deflections. She was nothing like the polished, ambitious women he occasionally dated when social obligations required companionship. Nothing like Lucas's mother, who had loved Ethan's drive until it consumed everything else in their relationship. Sarah was something else entirely, a woman who had faced real hardship and emerged stronger rather than bitter, who rebuilded rather than retreated, who seemed to understand instinctively what Ethan was only beginning to grasp, that his wealth and power were useless if he couldn't face the broken relationship with his son. Meanwhile, across town in a sleek office overlooking Central Park, James Harrington leaned back in his chair, studying the latest intelligence on Mason Enterprises. The reports about Ethan's distraction, the renovations at his penthouse, the sudden interest in his long-secluded son. "Interesting," Harrington murmured, a calculating smile playing at his lips. "After all these years, Ethan Mason finally has a vulnerability we can exploit." He turned to Catherine Renee, who sat across from him. "Tell me everything you know about the boy and this woman who's suddenly become a fixture in Mason's life." As one night fell over New York, three currents were converging. A father reluctantly opening the door to reconciliation, a woman whose compassion was becoming an unexpected bridge, and an enemy sensing opportunity in these new connections. The coming storm would test them all. The day Lucas moved into the Tribeca penthouse, Manhattan was washed in autumn sunshine that gilded the city's edges and softened its hard lines. Ethan stood in the newly renovated East Wing, surveying the space one final time. Sarah had overseen every detail, from the specialized equipment disguised within high-end furniture, to the subtle adaptations that would allow Lucas maximum independence without sacrificing aesthetic quality. "It's perfect," Sarah said, joining him in the sunlit living area. "Try to remember that no matter how this first day goes." Ethan nodded, tight-lipped. The knot in his stomach had been growing for hours. "The medical team?" "Already briefed and ready. They'll arrive an hour after Lucas is settled." She hesitated. "Remember what we discussed. They're here to support, not to create distance between you and Lucas." Before Ethan could respond, his phone chimed with a message from his driver, the I. Medical transport from Connecticut had arrived. Moments later, the private elevator announced its ascent. When the doors opened, Lucas wheeled himself out, his face carefully composed into neutral lines that reminded Ethan painfully of his own, practiced business expression. Behind him came Dr. Harrison and two assistants with Lucas's belongings. "Welcome home," Ethan said, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. Home had been a concept, not a reality, for so long. Lucas's eyes swept the space, taking in the renovations, the city vista beyond the windows, the careful attention to accessibility. "It's bigger than I remembered," he said finally. An awkward silence stretched between them, 5 years of distance compressed into a moment that neither knew how to navigate. "Let me show you the changes," Sarah interjected gently, stepping forward with a warm smile. "I'm Sarah Reeves. I manage the renovation project." Lucas's expression softened slightly as he turned to her. "You're the one who insisted on windows in the therapy room." "Guilty," she admitted. "I believe healing happens faster when you can see the world you're healing for." Something in her simple philosophy seemed to resonate with Lucas. He nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Show me what you've done to my father's pristine fortress." Over the next hour, Sarah guided Lucas through the space, explaining features and adaptations with a natural ease that gradually dismantled the initial stiffness. Ethan followed, observing the way she spoke directly to Lucas rather than about him. the way she framed each adaptation in terms of independence rather than limitation. The kitchen counters have sections that adjust hydraulically, she demonstrated, pressing a discrete button that lowered a portion of the marble countertop to wheelchair height. And the cabinets have pull-down shelving systems, so I can make my own coffee without calling for help, Lucas noted, a hint of appreciation in his voice. Exactly. I believe in accessibility that enables, not just accommodates. She glanced at Ethan. Your father was quite insistent about that principle. Lucas looked at Ethan with surprise. Was he? Ethan cleared his throat. The goal was to give you independence, not more dependence. It was a small moment, but something shifted in Lucas's expression. A glimpse of the connection that had once existed between them, buried beneath years of avoidance and pain. By evening, Lucas was installed in his new quarters. The medical team had reviewed protocols, and Dr. Harrison had departed with promises to check in regularly. Ethan found himself standing uncertainly in his own kitchen, unsure of the new rhythms his home would now follow. Sarah was gathering her things to leave when Lucas wheeled himself into the kitchen. Dad, he said, the word sounding tentative. After so much time calling him father in their formal interactions, I was wondering if we could have dinner, just us. The simple request caught Ethan off guard. Of course, he replied, trying to mask his surprise. What would you like? I can have anything delivered. Actually, Lucas said with a hint of challenge, I thought we might cook. Sarah mentioned the kitchen is fully accessible now. Sarah smiled as she collected her tablet. Everything you need should be in the pantry and refrigerator. I took the liberty of stocking basics. Ethan shot her a glance that was half gratitude, half panic. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cooked anything more complicated than coffee. I can stay and help get you started, Sarah offered, reading the situation perfectly. No, Ethan said, surprising himself with his decisiveness. We'll manage. After Sarah left, father and son faced each other in the gleaming kitchen, surrounded by appliances Ethan barely knew how to operate. What should we make? Lucas asked, a hint of his old mischievous smile playing at his lips. That depends, Ethan replied, tentatively matching his son's tone. What's the least likely to result in the fire department being called? Lucas laughed, a genuine sound that Ethan hadn't heard in years. Mom always said you could burn water. The mention of Rebecca, Lucas's mother, might once have created tension. Instead, Ethan found himself smiling at the memory. She wasn't wrong. She banned me from kitchen duty after I set off the alarms making toast. They settled on pasta, simple enough that even Ethan could manage boiling water, while Lucas, demonstrating unexpected culinary skill, directed the preparation of a sauce using ingredients Sarah had thoughtfully provided. Where did you learn to cook? Ethan asked as Lucas expertly instructed him on mincing garlic. After the accident, I had a lot of time in rehab, Lucas explained, his voice matter-of-fact. One of my therapists thought cooking would be good for fine motor skills. Turns out I liked it. He paused. It was something I could control when everything else was decided for me. The simple statement landed heavily, highlighting how little Ethan knew about his son's life and coping mechanisms. He'd been updated on medical progress, therapy milestones, educational achievements, but had never asked about the details that made Lucas who he was now. Their dinner conversation started awkwardly, but gradually found rhythm as they carefully navigated safe topics. Lucas's studies in computer science, changes in New York since he'd last lived in the city, the view from his new rooms. They avoided the accident, the years of separation, the mountain of unspoken hurts between them. I saw the chess set in your room, Ethan said as they finished eating. Do you still play? Lucas nodded. The therapists encouraged it for cognitive exercise. I got pretty good. Good enough to beat your old man? Ethan asked, attempting lightness. I don't know, Lucas replied, his eyes meeting Ethan's directly. We'd have to actually play to find out. The challenge was clear, not just about chess, but about whether Ethan was willing to invest time, to be present, to engage in the slow work of rebuilding what had been broken. Tomorrow evening, Ethan suggested, after your therapy session. I'll set up the board, Lucas agreed. Later that night, alone in his office, Ethan tried to focus on the mounting crisis with the Singapore project. Reports indicated that James Harrington had secured a meeting with key investors, potentially undermining Mason Enterprises' position. The rational move would be to fly to Singapore immediately, take personal control of the situation, demonstrate to the investors his unwavering commitment. Instead, Ethan found himself typing an email to Walter. "Handle Singapore personally. I'm needed in New York for the foreseeable future." Walter's response came within minutes. "Is everything all right? This isn't like you, Ethan?" No, it wasn't like him. At least, not the him he'd been for the past 5 years. But as Ethan walked through the quiet penthouse and paused outside Lucas's door, hearing the soft sound of music from within, he wondered if perhaps it was like the man he might have been all along, if fear and guilt hadn't driven him to hide behind wealth and work. The next morning, Sarah arrived to check on the final adjustments to Lucas's therapy equipment. She found Ethan in the kitchen attempting to make breakfast. "This is unexpected," she remarked, watching him struggle with the coffee machine. "Lucas mentioned he likes omelets," Ethan said by way of explanation, "though I'm beginning to think ordering from the deli downstairs might have been wiser." Sarah set down her bag and rolled up her sleeves. "Let me show you a trick for folding them perfectly." As they worked side by side in the morning light, Ethan found himself studying her profile. The practical ponytail, the faint smile lines around her eyes, the confident movements of someone comfortable in her own skin. She wasn't conventionally beautiful by the standards of his usual social circle, but there was something genuine about her that made those women seem like pale imitations by comparison. "Thank you," he said suddenly. "For the omelette rescue?" she asked lightly. "For seeing what I couldn't see, what Lucas needed, what I needed to do." Sarah's hands stilled momentarily. "You would have figured it out eventually." "No," Ethan admitted, the rare honesty feeling strangely liberating. "I wouldn't have. I'd have built him a medical wing and staffed it with experts and told myself I was doing everything possible, while keeping the actual relationship at arm's length," Sarah finished softly. Their eyes met in a moment of understanding that went beyond employer and employee, beyond the professional boundaries Ethan usually maintained so rigorously. The moment was interrupted by Lucas wheeling into the kitchen, his eyebrows rising at the domestic scene. "Something smells good," he said, glancing between them with undisguised curiosity. Later that day, as Sarah was leaving after overseeing the delivery of additional therapy equipment, Ethan walked her to the elevator. "Would you consider staying on?" he asked abruptly. "Not just for the renovation follow-up, but as a consultant for Lucas's transition. He responds well to you." Sarah regarded him thoughtfully. "He responds well to authenticity, Mr. Mason. He's had enough of professional detachment from the medical staff. What he needs now isn't another consultant." "What does he need?" Ethan asked quietly. "The same thing any 18-year-old needs. Connection, purpose, the chance to define himself beyond his limitations." She met his gaze steadily. "And a father who sees him as a person, not a responsibility or a reminder of past mistakes." Before Ethan could respond, his phone rang with Walter's distinctive ringtone. Singapore again, no doubt. Sarah nodded in understanding and stepped into the waiting elevator. "Think about what I said," she called as the doors closed. Ethan didn't answer the phone. Instead, he returned to the penthouse where Lucas was working on his laptop in the living room, afternoon light playing across his features in a way that, suddenly, painfully reminded Ethan of Rebecca, of the life they'd shared before ambition and arguments had torn them apart, before the accident that had destroyed whatever fragile connections remained. "Lucas," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "would you like to play that game of chess now?" Across town, James Harrington smiled as he reviewed the latest report from his informant within Mason Enterprises. Ethan was declining to travel to Singapore, delegating to Walter Ferguson instead. His routine was changing to accommodate his son's presence, and most interestingly, a woman named Sarah Reeves had become a regular visitor to the penthouse. "Perfect," Harrington murmured, reaching for his phone. "Get me everything on Sarah Reeves. Family, finances, past relationships, everything. If she's Mason's weakness, I want to know exactly how to exploit her. As evening settled over the city, the chess game between father and son stretched into hours, neither willing to concede. For the first time in years, they were truly seeing each other across the divide, and the walls that had separated them began, almost imperceptibly, to crumble. Autumn deepened into winter, and the rhythms of the Mason penthouse evolved with the changing season. The initial awkwardness between Ethan and Lucas gradually gave way to a tentative familiarity. Their chess games became a nightly ritual, followed by discussions that slowly expanded beyond safe topics into more meaningful territory. Sarah Reeves had declined Ethan's offer of a formal consulting role, but continued to visit regularly, officially to check on the adaptations to the penthouse, unofficially because her presence had become a catalyst for the healing taking place between father and son. On a snowy December evening, Ethan arrived home to find Sarah and Lucas laughing together in the kitchen, attempting a recipe that had clearly gone awry, judging by the flour dusting Lucas's shoulders and the smudge of chocolate on Sarah's cheek. "Do I want to know?" Ethan asked, setting down his briefcase. "Lucas was teaching me his secret brownie recipe," Sarah explained, wiping her hands on a towel. "It turns out the secret is making an enormous mess." "A controlled mess," Lucas corrected with mock seriousness. "There's a method to my madness." The easy camaraderie between them warmed something in Ethan's chest. Lucas had few visitors his own age, his pre-accident friends having drifted away during his years in the Connecticut facility. Seeing him relaxed and laughing with Sarah offered a glimpse of normalcy that had been absent from his life for too long. "Join us," Lucas invited, gesturing to the batter. "We need a taste tester." Ethan hesitated, the familiar pull of work tugging at him. There were emails to answer, calls to return, the Singapore situation still requiring attention despite Walter's best efforts. "The brownies will be ready in 20 minutes, Sarah added, her eyes meeting his with gentle challenge. "Surely Mason Enterprises can spare you that long." Something in her gaze broke through his habitual defenses. "I suppose the world won't end if I step away from my phone for an hour." The evening stretched into one of the most pleasant Ethan could remember in years. They ate brownies that were slightly overdone on the edges but perfect in the middle, talked about nothing important, and laughed at Lucas's stories from his physical therapy sessions. When Sarah eventually gathered her things to leave, Ethan walked her to the elevator, as had become their custom. "Thank you for tonight," he said, the words still feeling unfamiliar on his tongue. "Lucas seems happier when you're here." "Not just Lucas," Sarah observed quietly, her eyes searching his face. "You seem different too." "Different how?" "Less guarded, more present," she smiled. "It suits you." The simple compliment affected him more than any business accolade had in years. Before he could respond, her phone chimed with a text message. Her expression changed as she read it. "Everything all right?" Ethan asked. "Emma's running a fever. My mother's with her, but—" She was already pressing the elevator button. "Go," Ethan said immediately. "Let my driver take you. He's still downstairs." "I couldn't impose—" "It's not an imposition, please." The genuine concern in his voice seemed to surprise her. She nodded. "Thank you." After she left, Ethan returned to find Lucas watching him with a knowing expression. "What?" Ethan asked defensively. "Nothing," Lucas replied, but his smile said, "Otherwise, she's good for you, you know." "She's been good for both of us," Ethan deflected. "True, but I'm not the one who looks at her the way you do." The observation hung in the air between them, simple, direct, uncomfortably perceptive. Before Ethan could formulate a response, his phone rang. Walter again, this time with news he couldn't ignore. James Harrington had called an emergency press conference for the following morning, allegedly to reveal disturbing information about Mason Enterprises' business practices. The next day brought crisis. Harrington's press conference delivered a carefully orchestrated attack, implying financial improprieties in Mason's Singapore development and hinting at personal instability affecting Ethan's leadership. The stock dropped 8% before noon. "We need to respond immediately," Walter insisted during an emergency board call. Ethan, you need to be front and center to reassure the investors. Ethan agreed, shifting into the crisis management mode that had served him well through numerous business challenges. He spent the day in meetings, on calls, issuing statements that stabilized the stock price by late afternoon. It was nearly 9 when he finally returned home, exhausted. He found Lucas in the living room, the chess set untouched on the table, where they'd left it the night before. "I saw the news," Lucas said simply. "Harrington's desperate," Ethan replied, loosening his tie. "He's trying to undermine investor confidence because he can't compete on merit." "Is that all it is?" Ethan hesitated, sensing something deeper in his son's question. "He mentioned your personal situation in his statement," Lucas continued. "He was talking about me, wasn't he? About you bringing me home, changing your schedule." The perception startled Ethan. "Lucas, you're not—" "A liability," Lucas finished. "Maybe not intentionally, but that's how he's trying to frame it. That you're distracted, emotionally compromised." The business assessment was surprisingly astute, reminding Ethan that his son was no longer the 13-year-old boy from his fractured memories, but a young man with an analytical mind of his own. "Harrington will use anything he can," Ethan acknowledged. "But he's wrong about you being a distraction or weakness." "Am I?" Lucas asked quietly. 3 months ago, you would have been on a plane to Singapore at the first sign of trouble. Now you're delegating, staying in New York, coming home for dinner instead of sleeping at the office. Ethan sat down heavily, the weight of the day settling on his shoulders. "You think I should have gone to Singapore?" "I think I don't want to be the reason Mason Enterprises falters," Lucas replied. "I don't want to be your excuse for retreat, or worse, your reason for failure." The maturity in his son's words struck Ethan deeply. He'd spent years avoiding Lucas because he couldn't face his failure as a father. Now Lucas was concerned about being the cause of his failure in business. "Listen to me," Ethan said with an intensity that surprised them both. "James Harrington has been waiting for years to strike at me. If it wasn't this, it would be something else. And yes, my priorities have shifted since you came home. But that doesn't make me weaker, it makes me—" He searched for the right word. "Human," Lucas suggested with a hint of his recently recovered humor. "Something like that," Ethan admitted. "And Harrington doesn't understand that because he's never cared about anything except power and revenge." Later that night, Ethan found himself unable to sleep, his mind cycling between strategies to counter Harrington's moves and concern for Lucas's perception of himself as a burden. On impulse, he reached for his phone and called Sarah. "Is Emma all right?" he asked when she answered. "The fever broke an hour ago," Sarah replied, sounding tired but relieved. "Thank you for asking." "I'm sorry to call so late," Ethan said. "I just needed to talk to someone who isn't caught up in the business crisis." "I saw the headlines," she said. "Harrington seems determined." "He is. But that's not what's keeping me awake." Ethan found himself explaining Lucas's concerns, the words flowing more easily than he would have thought possible a few months ago. "He's trying to protect you," Sarah observed when Ethan finished. "He's worried that reconnecting with him is costing you professionally." "I know. And the irony is that for years I used work as an excuse to avoid him because I couldn't face my own guilt. Now he thinks he's a liability to my work." "What will you do?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, the rare uncertainty feeling strangely liberating. "For the first time in my career, I'm not sure what the right move is." "Maybe that's progress," Sarah suggested gently. "Maybe not having all the answers is exactly where you need to be right now." The next morning brought unexpected developments. An anonymous source had leaked documents to financial journalists showing that Harrington's competing Singapore proposal was built on fraudulent projections. By noon, Harrington Investment Group was facing scrutiny, not Mason Enterprises. "Who leaked the documents?" Ethan asked Walter during a hasty conference call. "Not us," Walter replied, sounding as surprised as Ethan felt. "But whoever did had inside access to Harrington's operation. This is detailed stuff, Ethan." The temporary reprieve gave Ethan space to think. That evening, over dinner with Lucas, he made a decision. "I'm going to Singapore," he announced. "Not because of Harrington, but because it's the right thing to do for the project. Walter has done well, but some relationships need personal attention." Lucas nodded slowly. "When do you leave?" "Tomorrow. But only for 4 days," Ethan added. "I've already confirmed with your medical team that everything will run smoothly while I'm gone." "You don't need to explain yourself to me," Lucas said, but Ethan could see the hint of old fears in his eyes, fear of abandonment, of patterns repeating. "Actually, I do," Ethan countered. "Because I'm coming back, Lucas. This isn't like before. I'm not running away, I'm just doing what needs to be done, and then I'm coming home." Home. The word held new meaning now, encompassing not just the luxury penthouse, but the relationship they were rebuilding day by day. "I believe you," Lucas said finally. The Singapore trip proved productive. Ethan's personal involvement reassured investors, and the contrast between Mason's transparency and Harrington's increasing scrutiny worked in their favor. By the time Ethan boarded his private jet for the return flight, the project was secure, and Mason Enterprises' stock had rebounded completely. What Ethan hadn't expected was the sense of longing he felt for New York, not for the office or the power it represented, but for the penthouse where Lucas was waiting, for the chess games and conversations that had become the center of his life, and increasingly for Sarah, whose calm wisdom and genuine warmth had become something he looked forward to each day. He called her from the plane. "How's Lucas doing?" "Missing you," she replied honestly. Though he'd never admit it, we played chess yesterday, but apparently I'm a poor substitute. And Emma? Fully recovered and back to terrorizing her dance teachers. He could hear the smile in her voice. "She's asking when she can meet this mysterious Mr. Mason, who sent the giant stuffed bear last week." Ethan had sent the gift impulsively, after learning the child was ill. "I'd like that," he found himself saying. "To meet her, I mean." There was a pause on the line. "Ethan," Sarah said carefully, "are you sure that's wise? Emma is impressionable. And we're what?" he asked when she didn't continue. "I don't know exactly," she admitted. "I'm an employee who's become, a friend? Something more? I don't want Emma confused by whatever this is between us." The honesty was refreshing after years of people telling him what they thought he wanted to hear. "I understand," he said, "but I'd still like to meet her someday when you're ready, when we're both clearer about what this is." The day Ethan returned from Singapore, he was met with 2 surprises. The first was Lucas, who had mastered a new transfer technique that allowed him greater independence, proudly demonstrating as Ethan entered the penthouse. The second was a formal investigation into James Harrington's business practices, announced by federal regulators that afternoon. "Did you know this was coming?" Lucas asked as they watched the news coverage. "Not specifically," Ethan replied, truthfully. "Though Harrington's made enough enemies over the years that it was only a matter of time before someone exposed him." Later that evening, as they resumed their chess game, Lucas placed Ethan in check with a move that revealed a surprising sophistication. "You've been practicing," Ethan observed, studying the board with new respect. "Sarah's better than she." "Let's on," Lucas admitted. "She says her father was a chess master." The mention of Sarah's father sparked a realization in Ethan, how little he actually knew about her life, her history, the path that had brought her into their lives at exactly the moment they needed her most. The next day, Ethan asked Walter to run a discreet background check on Sarah Reeves, not out of suspicion, but out of a genuine desire to understand the woman who had become so important to both him and Lucas. The report Walter delivered was straightforward. Sarah Reeves, 36, widowed at 29 when her husband, an Army engineer, was lost during an overseas deployment. Mother to Emma, now 8, former physical therapist who had transitioned to accessibility project management after renovating her family's historic hotel in Massachusetts to make it wheelchair accessible during Emma's illness. No financial irregularities, no suspicious connections, nothing to suggest she was anything other than exactly who she presented herself to be. What the report didn't explain was the inexplicable feeling of rightness Ethan experienced in her, presence, or the way Lucas lit up when she visited, or how the penthouse felt emptier when she left. A week after Ethan's return from Singapore, the fragments of their evolving relationship crystallized into something undeniable. Sarah had joined them for dinner, bringing Emma for the first time, a spirited child with her mother's direct gaze and infectious laugh. After dinner, while Lucas showed Emma his adaptive gaming setup, Ethan and Sarah stood on the terrace, overlooking the glittering city. "Thank you for tonight," Sarah said, her breath visible in the winter air. "Emma hasn't stopped talking about meeting Lucas since I told her about him. She thinks his wheelchair is the coolest thing ever." "He seems to like her too," Ethan observed, watching through the glass doors as Lucas patiently showed Emma how to navigate a game controller. "Children see differently," Sarah said quietly. "They don't focus on limitations, they see possibilities." "Is that what you see when you look at us?" Ethan asked, turning to face her. "Possibilities." The question hung between them, laden with meaning that went beyond the immediate context. "I see two people healing," she replied carefully. "Two people learning to connect again. And yes, I see possibilities." "What about when you look at me?" Ethan pressed, moving closer. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I see a man who's finally finding his way back to what matters. Who's learning. That real strength isn't about control or power or wealth." "And what is it about?" he asked, though somehow he already knew the answer. "Vulnerability," she said simply. "The courage to let someone see you as you really are, not as you pretend to be." It was the most profound truth anyone had spoken to him in years, perhaps ever. In that moment, the carefully constructed walls around Ethan's heart crumbled completely. He reached for her hand, feeling her fingers intertwine with his own in silent understanding. From the doorway, unnoticed by either of them, Lucas watched with Emma beside him. The young girl looked up at him with the innocent wisdom of childhood. "Mom's smile is different when she looks at your dad," she observed. "I know," Lucas replied, a smile forming on his own lips. "His is different too." 2 weeks later, James Harrington's world collapsed entirely when a former employee provided prosecutors with evidence of systematic fraud within his company. The final irony came when investigators revealed the source of the original leak that had triggered the investigation. Catherine Renee, the board member Harrington had attempted to turn against Ethan. "She came to me right after Harrington approached her," Walter explained when the news broke. "Said she never trusted him, but played along to see what he was planning. She's the one who warned us about his press conference, gave us time to prepare." The revelation closed the chapter on Harrington's vendetta, leaving Ethan free to focus on what truly mattered, the new life taking shape in the penthouse that had once been merely a symbol of success, but was now becoming a genuine home. On a bright January morning, as sunshine streamed through the windows of the therapy room, Lucas achieved a breakthrough with his neural interface treatment, a minute but measurable response in muscle groups that had been unresponsive since the accident. The medical team was cautiously optimistic, though they warned the road ahead remained long and uncertain. That evening, Ethan, Lucas, Sarah, and Emma celebrated with takeout from Lucas's favorite restaurant. As the night wound down and Emma fell asleep on the couch, Lucas wheeled himself to his room, pausing in the doorway. "Dad," he said, using the word that had once been so difficult but now came naturally. "Can we talk?" They moved to Lucas's private sitting area, where the chess set waited on a side table for their next game. "I need to ask you something," Lucas said, his expression serious. "Something we've never really talked about." Ethan felt a tightening in his chest, sensing what was coming. "Go ahead." "The accident," Lucas said quietly. "You blame yourself. You always have. I need to know why." The question Ethan had dreaded for 5 years hung in the air between them. The truth he'd been running from, burying himself in work to avoid. "Because it was my fault," Ethan said finally, the words releasing something that had been coiled inside him for years. "We argued that morning, your mother and I, about my work, my absence from your lives. She wanted to postpone the sailing trip because the weather report wasn't favorable, but I insisted. I'd already rescheduled twice for business emergencies. I couldn't bear to see the disappointment in your eyes again." Lucas listened silently, his eyes never leaving his father's face. "The storm came faster than predicted," Ethan continued, the memories washing over him. "I should have turned back earlier, should have listened to Rebecca. When the boom swung and knocked you overboard," his voice faltered, "I couldn't reach you in time. If I had just listened, if I hadn't been so stubborn, so determined to prove I could be the father who kept his promises despite the warnings." "Stop," Lucas said gently. "Dad, I need you to hear something. I've never blamed you, not once." Ethan looked up, startled. "The accident was just that, an accident," Lucas continued. "I remember that day. Mom was worried about the weather." "Yes, but I was the one who begged to go anyway. I was the one who unclipped my safety harness because it was uncomfortable. And when the boom swung, you dove in after me without hesitation." "But if I had just—" "No," Lucas interrupted firmly. "There's no if that changes what happened. But what could have changed is everything that came after. You couldn't save me from the injury, but you didn't have to disappear from my life too." The truth of his son's words struck Ethan with the force of revelation. For 5 years, he'd been punishing himself for the accident while simultaneously inflicting a deeper wound on Lucas through his absence. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, the words utterly inadequate for the years lost. "I thought I was protecting you from my failure, but I was really protecting myself from my guilt." "I know," Lucas replied simply. "And now we can stop, both of us. We can stop living in that moment and start building something new." As they embraced, Ethan felt the weight of 5 years lifting, not vanishing completely, but transforming into something that could be carried together rather than alone. From the doorway, Sarah watched silently, tears in her eyes. When Ethan looked up and saw her, she simply nodded, understanding without words the breakthrough that had occurred. Later that night, after Emma had been tucked into the guest room bed and Lucas had retired, Ethan and Sarah stood once again on the terrace, the city lights creating a private constellation around them. "I heard what Lucas said," Sarah admitted. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but—" "I'm glad you heard," Ethan replied. "You've been part of this journey from the beginning." "Not the beginning," she corrected gently. "Just the turning point. You and Lucas did the real work yourselves." Ethan shook his head. "We couldn't have done it without you. You saw what we needed when we couldn't see it ourselves." He took her hands in his, the gesture no longer hesitant, but certain. "Sarah, I don't know exactly what the future holds. Mason Enterprises is stable again. Lucas is making progress that seemed impossible months ago, and I'm learning to be the father he deserves. But I do know that I want you to be part of whatever comes next. You and Emma." "Are you sure?" she asked, her eyes searching his. "Your world is so different from ours." "It was," Ethan acknowledged, "but not anymore. My world isn't about towers and acquisitions now. It's about people, connections, the things I thought I could live without, until you showed me otherwise." As they stood together under the winter stars, Ethan Mason, once defined solely by wealth and power, understood at last what true fortune meant. The courage to face painful truths, the strength to begin again, and the wisdom to recognize that the most valuable assets in life couldn't be listed on any balance sheet. In the penthouse behind them, Lucas watched from his window, a smile of genuine contentment on his face for the first time in years. The future was uncertain. His recovery would have good days and bad. The family they were building was unconventional by any standard, and the business world would always present new challenges. But the foundations had been rebuilt on something stronger than before: truth, acceptance, and the kind of love that doesn't retreat when faced with difficulty. As Sarah leaned into Ethan's embrace, their silhouettes merging against the city lights, Lucas knew with absolute certainty that they had all at last found their way home. Dear listeners, we hope that Ethan and Lucas's journey of redemption and healing has touched your heart. For more emotionally captivating stories that explore the complexities of family bonds and second chances, we've prepared a special playlist you can find by clicking to your left. If this story moved you, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique narratives that delve into life's most profound challenges and triumphs. Join our community in the comments. Below, we'd love to hear which character resonated with you most. Stay tuned for our next emotional journey coming soon.